why and how you got into politics.
Well, I'm very flattered to be called the main man. Thank you. I think that may not be deserved, but
Yeah,
um, so I got into politics essentially because Theresa May was failing to get Brexit over the line. She made a great speech when she became prime minister, when she was appointed prime minister by the party, on the steps of Downing Street, talking about about managing the need to look at the entire economic model that the United Kingdom has, to put the UK first, to put the people of the United Kingdom first. And then she went on to say in a subsequent speech that no deal is agreed until nothing's agreed until everything's agreed. No deal is better than a bad deal. She said all the right things, but was obviously just hoodwinking the public. And in the background, her and her advisors were busy finding routes to effectively avoid leaving the European Union in substance. And this became clear to me by 2019. I heard Nigel Farage was setting up something called the Brexit Party. And a chap I knew said he knew Nigel. Would I like to meet him? I met Nigel. And the next thing I knew, I was sort of on my way to Brussels. And I've been on a journey of discovery since then, because it's when you really get in under the skin of politics, you see all the difficulties, which as a layman, as a businessman, as I was, even if you're politically aware, you don't really see it. And every time I think I've discovered all the ills that the country, to which the country has been subjected, I see more. and and so that just makes you stay your ground, stay in politics. And I feel at my age, having had a really good life in the United Kingdom, loving this country, loving its history, at least its historical, cultural context, I feel it's my obligation to do the best I can for the country, for its people, and obviously for my children. So that's why I'm in politics, and that's why I'm staying in politics. I think Western civilization is facing an existential threat. I think it will cease to exist in the way that we think of it, unless we get a grip of the way Europe, the United Kingdom, and the United States is governed.
definitely, definitely. One thing I would say is one of the things that people did try to do, they tried to vote for Brexit, didn't they? That was actually part of the fight back for Britain to take back sovereignty. We keep on hearing from a lot of different people on the political right. We need to acknowledge that people on the political right, that we've taken back sovereignty and we've taken back control, but we haven't, have we, Ben? And you've been
No.
advocating for a real Brexit. Brexit was the biggest mandate from the people telling the British establishment that they were happy with the direction of travel, where the country was going and everything. What's your opinion on how Brexit has turned out? What's happened to Northern Ireland? Because I know you've been advocating in Northern Ireland for a very long time about the sea border, haven't you?
Yeah, so I mean, you're absolutely right, Marcus. We haven't left the European Union. We The ticket that we were all asked to put a cross against was: do you want the United Kingdom to leave the EU or to remain in the EU? There was no suggestion that Great Britain could leave and part of the UK would be left behind, or that the process of leaving the EU would actually require us to sign up to a whole load of EU laws, alignment in various other areas, and so on. It was a simple question. And Parliament stood and continues to stand, I think, to a significant extent, in opposition to the people. And I think as the people of the United Kingdom, we can be very proud of the fact that we voted to leave the EU. We were probably the first country to express as a country its desire to break from the liberal global order, of which, at the heart of which is the EU, amongst other organizations, to break from that liberal global order and to bring back control to the nation state of the United Kingdom. That's what the vote to leave the EU was. It was, for goodness sake, please, can we stop running the country along the lines of international treaties and international supranational organizations, and can we start doing it with British national interest at heart, with the British people's interest at heart? That's what that cry in 2016 was. And then in 2017, there was a general election. And again, they voted for a Conservative Party that promised to get Brexit done. Then there was the European elections in 2019, and they voted to get Brexit done again by returning the Brexit Party in massive numbers to the European Parliament. And then in 2019, the entire election that Boris Johnson fought was on the issue of Brexit. And again, people voted to get Brexit done. So there were 4 elections or 4 plebiscites in which the people said, we want control back in the UK. And Boris Johnson's 2 deals that he delivered, first the withdrawal agreement and then the trade and cooperation agreement that came 11 months later, both of them failed to bring back control to the UK. And as you rightly say, Marcus, we left Northern Ireland behind. There's a border down the Irish Sea. And the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is embedded in the withdrawal agreement, doesn't just produce that Irish Sea border, it actually has a loop back into Great Britain, making it very difficult for Great Britain to, even if we wished simply for Great Britain to be independent of the EU, it makes it very difficult even for Great Britain to achieve that. And then along came the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, as I mentioned, 11 months later, and that signed the entire UK up to further alignment and further obligations to the EU. So, for example, we are not allowed to deviate from state aid laws, competition laws, employment laws, and environmental laws, including net zero, such as those laws were in December 2020 when we left the EU. We're committed to all those, or that legal framework. And also in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement is a commitment that we will stay in the European Convention of Human Rights, even though the ECHR has nothing to do with the EU and the EU is not a member of the ECHR. In the treaty we signed with the EU, we've committed to staying in it. And also through that treaty, we've conceded the European arrest warrant, which means that if a Polish court, for example, issues an arrest warrant for a Polish individual, they can just reach into the UK and take that individual out without our courts being able to protect them. And the same applies for a British citizen, by the way. So if a European court were to issue an arrest warrant for Nigel Farage, it could just reach into the UK and take Nigel out without British courts being able to do much about it. That is not sovereignty. If our courts can't even protect our people, we haven't got sovereignty. So at multiple, and I can go on and on and on, by the way, but at multiple different levels, we have not left the EU. And people say, well, Brexit's been a disaster. Brexit hasn't succeeded. No, it's not that Brexit hasn't succeeded. It's that we haven't succeeded in leaving the EU. That's what's gone wrong. And so in some senses, we've got the worst of all worlds because we've lost our representation in the institutions of the EU, the Commission, the Parliament, the Council, the European Court of Justice, and so on. We've lost our representation, but we're still hitched at the hip in a way that makes it impossible for us to do what's right for the UK. And one of my disagreements with Nigel Farage is that he says Brexit's done. We just haven't done it very well. And he's fundamentally wrong. And I think he needs to correct his language on that. Brexit's not done. It won't be done until we have left properly. And we should have done it the way Trump would have done it. The way Trump renegotiated the North America, the way the Free Trade Association, NAFTA. When he renegotiated NAFTA, what he did was just pull out and say, right, the US is out. These are the terms I require. And until he got the terms he wanted, NAFTA was suspended. And we should have just left the EU and said, sod it, we're out. Now let's have a deal. But we didn't have a political class that had the will to do that.
No, they've never listened to us, and I don't think they ever will. This is why we've all got to get active, isn't it? And it doesn't matter what political party you're in. I encourage everyone to get active, stand in your local communities, and take power back from the institutions what have destroyed this country. So, John, you wanted to ask Ben some questions, didn't you? And then we will go to Alan afterwards. So you wanted to talk. There's been a lot going on at the moment with the grooming gang scandal.
Yeah, yeah, we watched a video of yours, Ben, where you'd been interviewed, and it was, do you want an inquiry or what do you want to do? And you said you want to get like a team and go out and start like arresting people, investigating. As we know, I don't think there's any inquiry that's really been had a positive effect on dealing with the grooming gangs. Not, you know, there never has been. And even just in Manchester and Rochdale, there's been about 10 inquiries, and that's not including the rest. We've got evidence. There is evidence now to arrest people and charge them with offences. Would you be all right arresting them people and charging them with offences before there's any kind of inquiry done or anything like that?
Well, I mean, what I was advocating, and which I think is the right way to do it, frankly, is to set up a special branch of the police charged with the responsibility of investigating the police force, investigating their colleagues, in other words, investigating social services, investigating local councils in these 50 odd towns across the United Kingdom, where I don't call them grooming gangs, I call them gang rape gangs, where these gang rape gangs have been operating, and to bring to hold to account and to bring to justice those who had a responsibility to uphold the law and apprehend the people who were part of these gang rape gangs but turned a blind eye. And of course, the seriousness of the crimes committed will vary between the various groups of people involved. But I think there should be arrests made of police officers who turned a blind eye to the gang rapes deserve to be arrested. And people in social services who are aware of the gang rapes deserve to be arrested. So whilst a national inquiry, if it were genuinely tasked with investigating, you know, not just how these gang rapes occurred, but how it was that there was a systemic reluctance across all our services to recognize that they were even taking place. I mean, that inquiry would be helpful, but it needs to go beyond that, doesn't it? Because unless people are brought to justice, unless people are made accountable, it will happen again. And the J report, which everyone wants to bang the drum about, the J report says on page 13 that actually all the evidence presented to the committee that was charged with investigating the grooming gangs, as they call them in the J report, all that evidence was devoid of ethnic makeup. There was no record of ethnicities. There was no record of ethnicities of the perpetrators as well as the victims. And so if there was no record of the ethnicities, they couldn't have possibly been prosecuting this or investigating it without fear or favor. They were just looking at it kind of blind. And what I want to understand is, and what I suspect, by the way, is that because of the progressive discrimination in favor of ethnic minorities, because of the fear of policemen, social services and council officers and so on, because of their fear of being accused of being racist or xenophobic, they weren't prepared to challenge and do their job in the right way. Progressive discrimination is a really big problem in the United Kingdom, and it's at the heart of the problem of multiculturalism. And unless we're prepared to be honest about that debate and have it out in the open and shine a bright light on it, no inquiry is worth having. But as I say, I would like to go one step further and have the powers of arrest, investigation and arrest. If people have committed crimes, become accomplices to the gang rape gangs by not doing their jobs, they should be held to account.
Definitely.
Yeah. Go on, Marcus.
All I was going to say is, and I want to ask all you guys this question is, what do you think we need to get something sorted out? Because this can't continue on. This is going to continue on unless we actually stop it. And like Ben said, we need to get to the root. It's okay talking about things that we all already know what's happening, right? But we need to stop young girls being groomed, right? And the thing is, what do you think the fallout in society will be when everyone finds out how deep this goes? Like Ben said, a lot of the institutions in this country that we should all be able to look up to and believe in have been complicit in this. And what do you think the fallout will be? Because everyone will lose trust within society. And one thing that I worry about is actually racial tensions as well, because they've been, throwing the can down the road, and they've been like trying to cover this up because they want to, go on with this left-wing utopian dream that multiculturalism is wonderful, that we're all under one, utopian dream, that and every culture can get along. And of course, we all know that's a load of rubbish, because if every culture could get along, there would never be a war in the world, and it's very typical of the left-wing dribble that they come out with, that, oh, we're all the same, this is all going to be okay. But it isn't. It sounds exactly like a left-wing utopian dream, a bit like what the Labour Party supports would be, but it's not actually based in any reality, is it? So I wanted to go to you, Ben. What do you think the fallout would be within
So
society?
I hope the fallout is an awakening.
Yeah.
Can I just go one step back?
Yeah. Okay.
The liberal global order doesn't recognize nation states. It thinks that the governance of the world is best done through these supranational institutions and cooperation, not cooperation, integration of countries, not cooperation between countries, but integration of countries.
Yeah.
And when they head towards that supranational vision of global governance, nation states, as I mentioned, cease to exist. And of course, if nation states become unimportant, then citizens of nation states become unimportant. And if citizens of nation states become unimportant, then immigration is fine, because you don't recognize the importance of citizenry. So immigration is just every individual, whether they're from Pakistan, India, Japan, China, Nigeria, the United States, Canada, they're all equal in the eyes of the British government. It's not that British citizens should get preference. And that's where it's gone wrong. And so they've taken this view ideologically, as you rightly say, Marcus. It's an ideological position they've taken, that all humanity is equal, all humanity is welcome. And they make policies for all of humanity. And in the process of doing it, they've set aside that which is important for the United Kingdom. So immigration has gone through the roof. We've had a rate of demographic change with which we cannot cope. And then in order to make those that have come to this country welcome, they've instituted policies which progressively discriminate in favor of those minorities. And effectively, what those policies and regulations say, in a nutshell, is come to our country. We won't require you to integrate. We will not require you to buy into our culture or adopt our culture. You're most welcome, because we recognize the importance of a liberal world, to practice your own cultures. You will be protected in our country in practicing your own cultures. In fact, we will celebrate your culture, and we will in many ways set aside our own cultures and our own sensibilities in the promotion of your culture. And so what we've created is what I call multicultural silos in the United Kingdom. North Africans, Pakistani ethnic origin, Indian ethnic origin, Middle Eastern, Iraqi, Libyan, whatever ethnic origin, all operating separately. And that's the breakdown of society. The definition of society is having an integrated culture. The definition of a nation state is having an integrated culture. And we have willfully set aside an integrated culture. We've turned our back on that which is traditionally and obviously British, and we have welcomed this multiculturalism. And we put a protected status around multiculturalism. Or ethnic minorities are given jobs, promotions, encouraged into the workplace, protected in the workplace, in a way that the white settled majority of this country are not. So we see things like the Bank of England the other day putting out an advertisement, I don't know if you saw this, saying a background in finance is not required. We just want people from different backgrounds. I mean, can you imagine? This is the Bank of England. And the RAF saying that we're not looking for the best fighter pilots, we're looking for different ethnicities so that we can meet our quotas for the different ethnicities that we need to employ. MI5, MI6 and GCHQ put out an advert the other day for interns from ethnic minorities. This is the dumbing down of our institutions. It's the hollowing out of our economy, and it's the destruction of our culture. Multiculturalism is deeply damaging. The rate of demographic change of this country, combined with the policies that we've adopted, is going to produce precisely the result you've you've put in a nutshell, Marcus, which is inter-ethnic tension. That's what we're going to get. And if we don't know where this is going, all we need to do is cast our eye across the channel to France and see what problems France has got. And the way France has coped with what's become, I think, a deeply divided country is by ever more draconian policing. The Champs-Élysées is set alight every 5 seconds, or windows smashed every 5 seconds. And then the French police turn up with very heavy-handed methods to deal with it. And that's where we're heading. We're heading into a kind of dystopian police state where, and we need to get a grip of it before we get there. You know, there are beautiful, I don't know how old you are, Marcus, but I can absolutely testify. And perhaps John, I know Alan will be able to testify for sure. John, I'm sure, will remember too. Policing in this country was done by consensus. We had lovely bobbies walking up and down the streets with their hats. They were part of the community. You knew your bobby's name. They carried a truncheon. They never carried a gun. What we're increasingly going to see is policemen carrying guns, policemen wearing body armor, policemen looking distinct and outside of the community, because in order to control the people, they're going to have to be more draconian. And that consensual relationship that we had with law enforcement and the people, I mean, it's already broken. It's broken. We are now living in not just a two-tier criminal justice system, we're living in a two-tier society. And it is disastrous for the United Kingdom. It's disastrous for Western civilization. And we need to get a grip of it. We need to dramatically reduce immigration. We need mass deportations of illegal migrants. We've got 1.2 million illegal migrants in the United Kingdom. They need to be detained and deported. It might take a number of years, but we need to do it. And we need to dramatically reduce immigration. And we should also have programs for the peaceable, consensual repatriation of people who want to go back, who are prepared to go back to their countries, so we can then settle the UK. And we need a positive vision of integration. It's not good enough to say that we will protect and celebrate your cultures. We need to do the opposite. We need to say, if you come to this country, you have to learn our history. You have to learn our language. You have to sing our national anthem. You have to pay your allegiance to king and country. And you have to set aside and understand that the cultures that you came from are not our culture. You have to buy into our culture. And part of that, I'm perhaps going into too much detail, but part of that is teaching our children to be proud of their country, teaching an accurate, positive vision of British history. And we've got a hell of a lot to be proud of. And if we can make our children proud of our history, they will be proud of the country in which they live. And if they're proud of the country in which they live, we will then become a great country again. Without national pride, you cannot be a nation. You cannot be a great country. Pride is very important. So when I say people say, what are you fighting for? I say a sovereign, independent, prosperous, and proud United Kingdom. We have to be proud of who we are. Anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a sermon to
No, you're right. Yeah. Excellent answer. Alan, you want to say something, mate?
Yeah, I'm wondering if the impact on society, which you were sort of exploring there, I might disagree a little bit with both of you in that, if the inquiries we've had in the past have had no teeth, we know that, and it is still going on. We did a program last week, which we talked about that. If we had something like you've described there, Ben, which I think is a brilliant program, is actually getting people, prosecuting them, kicking them out of the country, it will be then a frightener for the people that are carrying on doing it, and it will stop it. Because if we have proper discipline and proper punishment, it will start waking people up, and that'll be a pattern then across all kinds of other things like fraud and murder and stuff like that. Because at the moment, like you say, our hands are tied. Oh, we can't do this because of that. With the paperwork, we've got to get done. And it's destroying the culture of this country. And so many people are so frustrated. And I think, actually, once we see that happening, actually, racial tensions will start to diminish, because we'll see people working alongside each other to try and
I agree.
trap these people and punish them. Yeah,
I agree. The system will start writing itself.
exactly.
And you're right, it'll feed through to other forms of criminality too. Pandora's box is open on criminality. We're losing control of criminality. Criminals are thinking, chances if I commit a petty crime, as the police term it, I won't even be arrested. No one's even going to bother investigating me because they've called it a petty crime. So they've legalized petty crime through the back door simply by creating the nomenclature petty crime. And once you open Pandora's box in that way, it's very, very hard to shut it. But if people can see, as you rightly say, Alan, that criminal justice will be applied blindly, don't care where you come from, what your background is, what your special needs are, etc. You committed a crime, you will do the time, or you'll be deported, or whatever the answer is. People will wake up and it'll settle society. And I had a chat. You may have seen a little clip that I did. I was talking to a very senior member of Pakistani law enforcement agency a couple of weeks ago. And he's a friend of mine. And I picked up the phone and I said, look, Pakistan should speak up. And this would be great for Pakistan. Speak up and volunteer to take back any dual nationals in the United Kingdom who are Pakistani and British and have been part of these gang rape gangs. Volunteer to take them back and give them the kind of sentencing that they would get in Pakistan, which, by the way, would be hell compared to anything they get in the United Kingdom. And he said, Ben, we've already got a treaty with the United Kingdom on the deportation of Pakistani nationals. It's called the Pakistan Prisoner Transfer Treaty. And we would gladly take Pakistani nationals back. There'd be no problem. There's a treaty already in place, but we don't see our government using it.
No. All they do is make up excuses, especially Labour. Well, Conservatives are just complicit in this as well. I just want to make people know that we don't just blame it on the Labour Party, because the Conservative Party did have 14 years to solve this. Or the Labour Party, and I don't know if you would all agree with me, they try to act like they're doing something about something, and they're not. They're just, they're saying, oh, we need all these new laws. But it's like, so there isn't already laws against these things already? Why do we need to bring in silly new laws that we already have? And these things are illegal in the first place. It's basically them trying to say, look, we're doing something, but they're basically not. Would you all agree with that?
I completely agree. And I think one of the key things that we've got to do as a country is not make new laws. I think we need to repeal laws. Everyone's up in arms, for example, about this free speech law that they wanted to be brought in so that you could enforce free speech at universities. Let me just say, when I was at university, when I was at school, there was no prohibition on free speech. We didn't need a law to protect our free speech. What's happened is that lots of different laws have been made that prohibit free speech. And instead of now bringing in a new law saying we must have free speech, what we need to do is identify those laws that have shut down free speech and repeal them. And actually, I think any new government coming into power after this horrible Labour government is gone needs to concentrate not on reform, but actually restoration. We need to repeal whole hosts of EU law, EU regulations, EU derived law from directives. Lots of the stuff Tony Blair, everything Tony Blair did. I often say this: if you're thinking what should I do when I get into government? I don't really know how to start. Just look at everything Tony Blair did and reverse it, and you'll probably take the United Kingdom back to a very happy place.
Definitely.
On the back of that, there was a Gerald Batten, a UKIP leader for a period of time. He said if we repeal the 1972 Act when we joined the EU, it would repeal all those things that followed anyway. And that might be a better place to start. We could start again, pick and choose, the best ones that we wanted for ourselves.
Yeah. But just repeal. And when you're tired of repealing, repeal some more. You know, that's what we need to do. The beauty about our legal system, at the risk of digressing, is that the reason we, in my view, one of the major reasons why we became such a powerful country was because our legal system permits us to do whatever we want unless there's an express law prohibiting us from doing it. The European legal system is the opposite of that. They're not allowed to do anything in their countries unless they have a specific law that enables them to do it. That's why they're way behind us in ingenuity, lateral thinking, you know, seeing the big picture, being able to look at a collage and come to the right conclusion. They're very dogmatic in Europe because they need to be guided by their laws. We had common law, where everything is permitted unless it's expressly prohibited. And so we just need to repeal, get rid of this civil code that we've adopted through our membership of the EU, get back to being British, get back to being that freewheeling, pro-private enterprise, pro-small and medium-sized enterprises. You know, our empire was, obviously we had the East India Company and we had some significant influence in the world, but our empire was effectively about small businesses doing incredibly well. You know, entrepreneurialism, being rewarded. I know it's not fashionable to say any of this because we're meant to be ashamed of our imperial past, but actually that's our history. And we need to get back to that. We need to get back to that as fast as possible. So it's restoration, not reform, in my view. A lot of it's restoration. Obviously, we need some reform, but it's really restoration is where we need to focus.
Definitely. So you did actually bring up something interesting. So you asked me how old I was actually earlier. This comes into it, right? I'm about to turn 26 in a couple of days, but I remember what I referred to what you said earlier, and it goes into the British Empire as well. When I was in history class and I done my A-levels in history, basically all I was taught is actually to hate my country's past, you know, that everything that we ever did was wrong, you know, especially in the colleges as well, the college that I lived near. You know, I said I supported Nigel Farage and UKIP at the time because that was the thing at the time. Brexit Party didn't exist. And basically everyone turned around to me and was like, oh no, that's racist. You can't say that. You know, we had slaves or all this and that. But to go back to what you're saying, I always made the argument, well, yes, every country has done something wrong in the past, but except from Europeans and people who live in Europe, they don't seem to have the self-loathing of their culture. No country you can ever look to will ever say, well, you know, we've done all this stuff, so therefore we are bad today, if you get what I mean. And one of the things that really made me happy when you said this is, yes, we do have a proud history. We brought democracy to the world and everything. Okay, we did have the empire, but we brought the Industrial Revolution to the world and everything. We lifted people out of poverty, and it wasn't by having a big state. It was actually through low taxation, you know, getting people working, having people have pride in their communities, and we really do need that back. Because one of the problems I find with people my own age is this. I think the left have purposely done this, by the way. I think this is one of the part of the long march through the institutions. I think this was all planned out a long time ago, even before I was born. I always thought, well, none of these people in this political class who are threatening me and saying I'm this and that, they don't even know much about their culture. So why would they fight for their culture if they don't know what it is?
Exactly right. Why would you fight for your country if you can't identify that which you associate within your country? You know, they're killing the nation state. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is why we've gone down this very materialistic kind of route and everything. We've lost faith in our communities, and it's not surprising, especially with what the left has actually done. Like, who is going to have their faith in their community when you see the corruptions with the rape gangs, and they are rape gangs, not grooming gangs, right? At the end of the day, with all these institutions failing everybody, nothing works anymore, then it's not a surprise no one wants to fight for their culture anymore. They don't want to say anything positive. Yes, it's not about denying what's happened in the past, because obviously we can't change that. But throwing statues into rivers, for example, is not going to fix that. You need to talk about where we went wrong in history and talk about what we did right. And not everything Britain has ever done is evil. The same way, a lot of my Japanese friends, they don't have self-loathing for what happened in World War II. They don't even think like that. They're
Well,
proud.
let me just give you a personal experience.
Yeah.
I was born in Pakistan in 1965, so that's what is that? That is 18 years after partition, after
Right.
the United Kingdom. So in the tailwinds of the British Raj is when I was born. Karachi, which is where I was born, was a very clean city when I was a child. Clean, wide open avenues, fantastic irrigation system, open parks which were well watered, a fantastic judicial system which was left behind by the British, great schools, one of which educated me, again, all set up by the British, terrific hotels, terrific public libraries, terrific setup as a child. And my entire peer group that I associated with as a child was pro-British. Every single one that I knew in my childhood. I left Pakistan at the age of 13 in 1979. But in my entire time in Pakistan, the people I grew up with were pro-British, and we recognized the terrific legacy of the British Empire. Railway, I haven't mentioned railways. People like mentioning railways, but it's absolutely true. The railway system was great. So when the United Kingdom went abroad and it brought people, it didn't into the empire, it didn't do it. It didn't tend to do that forcibly. It wasn't with a vision to create an empire. It was through trade associations, through trading, through building, and through investment in the local communities that it went and engaged with. Karachi was a great city when I was a child. As we've moved further away from people's memory of the legacy of the British rule in India, Pakistan has become less pro-British, more prone to becoming anti-British, more prone to the kind of settled view that we even have in this country, that the empire was not good, it was bad, etc., etc., etc. And history is being rewritten. And I know that because I've experienced it. And when I speak to my peer group, so 59-year-olds in Pakistan who I grew up with, they say they still volunteer. Yeah, no, it was a much better place in that post-Raj period, into which we had the great privilege of being born. So I've got first-hand experience of the United Kingdom's legacy, and it was a good legacy. It was a legacy of which we should be proud. And it's not about the rapacious colonization of countries across the globe. Sure, we went abroad and we wanted to enrich ourselves in the process, and lots of proceeds were brought back to the United Kingdom. But it was two-way. The world is a much better place for our existence. The world is a much better place for the British Empire. It absolutely is. We exported common law. International trade turns on the existence of the British Empire. If there hadn't been our law and our experiences and what we did in the 19th century, there wouldn't be international trade in the way that we have it nowadays. And, I can go on and on. But we should be proud. And we've got a great deal about which to be proud. And our empire, unlike the European ones, was, as I say, peaceful. A lot of the European empires were incredibly aggressive. A lot of it done under the sword, with millions of people being killed in the pursuit of power. And they were rapacious. The Netherlands, King Leopold, for example, went to the Congo. I think 2 million people were killed under King Leopold's order in the Congo. I mean, nothing like that in the empire ever, in the British Empire.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also, I think there's a lot of things we could be proud about, but obviously we did have a part in slavery, but we also had a big part in ending slavery on the European
We
continent.
ended it. We led the ending of it.
Yeah, and we sacrificed so much. And the problem is, there's a lot of people who, not trying to be nasty, I think they have a bit of chip on their shoulder, right? And they dislike Britain because of that. But the problem is, you can look around the world today and there's still slavery going on all around the world, but we don't seem to talk about that because that's inconvenient. But we can talk about things what happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and that's somehow everyone else's fault in the UK today. Alan, mate, you had some questions for Ben. Would you like to ask about
on that conversation there, though, it's important to think that also some countries actually held on to their empires, like France. You know, they've still got a territory across the globe, and some places, there's an African state, can't remember right off the top of my head, I think it might be Niger, but I'm not completely sure. When they work out their annual turnover, the first portion of money has to go to France for being part of the empire. You know, it's a very poor country in the middle of Africa, but they have to pay their dues before they start worrying about infrastructure and everything else that we do. So it's just we could do a whole program on that. My question is about democracy, and you have been a hero in the democracy movement for stamping your feet within reform and saying, you know, we want to see this more democratized for the public. So it's become a party that it can be trusted. A lot of people are jumping into reform, thinking it's, you know, the golden ticket, if you like, because they've fallen out with Conservatives, fallen out with Labour. They can't see the Liberal Democrats or Greens ever achieving anything remarkable. And I think a lot of them are going to be disappointed. We're a lot of stories from people being turned down as candidates, that kind of thing. This broadcast we've labelled up, the British people have been betrayed. And my question to you is, you know, what do you think the betrayal has been with democracy? Because people go and vote, you know, for once every 4 years for a parliament that's supposed to be, you know, working for the people, but we just seem to be time after time, you know, being served the most, you know, horrendous treatment. Considering we're supposed to be like a global superpower and look after other people, we can't even look after ourselves, you know. And I just wonder, from a democracy point of view, where do you see us, where have we been and where we're going? You know, that's the important thing, I think, because it's an important thing to me, and I just wanted to raise that question.
Yeah, so it's a very big question, and I'll try and be as brief as possible. But we roll off our tongues the fact that we live in a liberal democracy. If you speak to people, they all say we live in a wonderful liberal democracy. Liberalism is the promotion of the rights of the individual. That's what liberalism is, liberating the individual. And democracy is the protection and promotion of the majority's interest. And the majority's interest is often not consistent with the individual's interest. They act in tension. And it's, on the whole, it can be a very good form of tension, because there's a debate between promoting the rights of the individual and promoting the rights of the majority, so that you get a healthy balance, one would hope, between the two agendas. But and liberalism's been great. So, for example, the emancipation of women comes through, a liberal approach, making sure that they've got equal opportunities in the workplace and so on and so forth. But liberalism has gone to the nth degree now, and it's absolutely working to the detriment of the majority interest. In fact, I would say that, as you've alluded to, Alan, we don't really live in a democracy anymore, because it's a liberal order. It's the promotion of the individual at the expense of the majority. And when I'm talking about the expense of the majority, I'm talking about the expense of our community, the majority interest in our communities, and the nation state. And when you start making laws and practicing regulations and thinking of the individual in isolation, and you forget about the majority, you are not working for the greater good. You've actually you've set democracy aside. And a symptom of this, which we're all seeing more and more, is the shutting down of free speech. Because if you want the individual to reign supreme, the individual's right to reign supreme, you have to shut the majority up. Otherwise, they might fight back and they might speak about it. And so freedom of speech is one of the things first to go when liberalism is out of control. And the form of liberalism that we're practicing is one of a global nature, as we've touched on earlier. And it's become embedded through what they always, claim to be international laws, membership of supranational institutions like the UN, the EU, WHO, World Bank, I'm taking guidance from the IMF, etc., etc. And in citing all these international laws and conventions, and indeed the creation of domestic quangos and regulatory bodies that prohibit us, the people, from holding our politicians to account, because actually it's the Office of Budget Responsibility, which is a black box of unaccountability that determines if a budget, if a particular chancellor's budget is acceptable or not. Or it's the Bank of England, another black box, which we can't hold to account over its monetary policy. Or it's Ofcom, who make decisions about what we can and can't hear on television. All these domestic, unaccountable, what I call black boxes, quangos, coupled with this international morass of treaties and memberships, has embedded the liberal order and has set democracy aside. And we have to. It's always about degrees. And we need to yank that pendulum back from the extreme liberalism that we've come to practice towards families. As Marcus, I'm so glad he mentioned families.
Yeah.
Families, communities, our tribe, our people. We've got to yank it back to the majority interest. And we've got to, and thereby reinvigorate our democracy. Our democracy is being threatened. We tend to take democracy for granted.
Yeah.
We think, oh, we're the mother of all modern democracies. The United Kingdom will never cease to be a democratic country. Wrong. We cannot take it for granted. The form of democracy we're practicing in the UK is less than 100 years old. Women didn't get equal voting rights to men until 1928. We're only 96 years old as the form of democracy that we think we are. And we have to keep fighting for it, or that extreme liberal order, which Marcus calls the extreme left, which is what they are. The extreme left, that liberalism, that's all from the left-hand side of politics. They will set aside our democracy, and they want to do it. That's why they love all these international treaties. Anyway, I'm going around slightly in circles, but you see the point I'm making.
Yeah.
We've got to yank control back to our elected officials.
Can I just quickly say something, and then I'll go to Alan? So liberalism is a very new thing. When humans or any tribe has survived in the past, they've always said what is good for us, not what is good for everyone else. And that's the problem within society nowadays. Yeah. Everyone's like, okay, well, I'd rather go on holiday 6 times a year than continue my bloodline or my family and everything. And we have become very narcissistic in society. What we need is a collective effort from the British people to actually keep our democracy going, because freedom isn't free. We've seen in the Middle East, there's been countries what have been democracies in the past, and they've turned into dictatorships, and they've turned into, sorry for my language, shitholes, basically. And we need to be careful, because especially people my age, I worry, because when I went to college, there were quite a few communists, and you would think they would actually know what that leads to, but some people my age really don't know their history, apparently, or if they do, I'm a bit concerned about their well-being. But nonetheless, when it comes down to it, what I'm trying to say is, good men had to die so we could live in a democracy. Freedom isn't free. You have to stand up for what is right. And I'll go to Alan in a sec, but I think we see a lot of this happening in America, that people are actually having enough and actually standing up. And I hope that in a couple of years' time, it seemed like we seem to be a couple of years behind America. What happens in America will affect what happens over here and vice versa, I believe. But nonetheless, I
just say one thing before you go to Alan, if you don't mind me? Sorry.
Yeah,
I know I've spoken a lot, but I just want to say one thing. If you need an example of what you've just described, Marcus, it is lockdowns. We locked down the country, even though we knew that the majority of people would be absolutely fine with the virus. The vast majority of people would be absolutely fine with the virus. But in the pursuit of the protection of everyone, we had to give up our civil liberties in order and be locked down. And we are paying a massive price as a country because we locked down. And Boris Johnson used to liken our fight against the virus to World War II. And it was completely the opposite. Because in World War II, we gave up our lives to protect our civil liberty. In COVID, we gave up our civil liberties to protect our lives. It was the opposite. We are the antithesis of the nation that went to war in World War II. So I just say that. Alan, yeah, sorry.
No, that's very relevant. When we started talking about democracy, there's a plethora of comments in the comment box. It's hard to keep track and then chip in every now and again, but I thought it was relevant. Jason said, "Is democracy a good thing?" And depends what you mean by liberalism. For democracy to work, we need a unified country, similar values.
Agreed.
Democracy doesn't work in our current setup. So yeah, a lot of people are looking at this, and I think it's important to point out that we don't live in a democracy. There's various models of our societies run, but my best sort of one I now to is the plutocracy, and that's a small group of rich people who decide who the rest of us vote for and how we move forward. And you know, once you understand that, you know, pure democracy is everybody having a single vote on a decision and going with the majority. And then, you know, this doesn't work. This isn't what we wanted. Only 20% of the people apparently voted for Labour in the last election. Most people, you know, didn't. So, you know, how they've got the right to stand there and dictate all these things that are going to affect our lives for the rest of our lives. Things like changing the age of retirement and things like that. So, but we have to put things in place. I understand that, you know, because we can't just let a dictator come in and rule and everything. But we spoke earlier about Trump, and I'm just curious about your opinion about the start of his next his inauguration and administration, which obviously is going to happen very soon after this broadcast. What's your take on everything that's going on in America?
Well, if Trump does what he says he's going to do, I think I'm hugely supportive. You know, if he does enforce the US's borders, he deregulates, gets rid of net zero, cuts taxes, promotes American interests, unashamedly puts America first. These are all welcome things, very welcome, because what he will effectively do for the US from an economic perspective is supercharge the US in the pursuit of perfectly legitimate aims, the promotion of his people's interest. And when he supercharges the US, then we in Europe and the United Kingdom, we have a choice. Do we adopt similar policies so that we can supercharge our own economies and avoid losing all capital and all talent to the US? Or do we continue to sit and practice our sclerotic, high government spending, high taxation, highly regulated society, a kind of socialist approach to economic management? Do we do that and then just watch capital leave the United Kingdom and go to the US, and all our bright young people leave our country and us go down the pan? And I think that probably will suffer to start with as the US supercharges itself. And then I think we will wake up and we'll go, oh shit. Can I say that? Oh shit. We
Yeah,
better get on this bandwagon or we're going to get rolled over. And I hope we get there. You know, we've already seen positive results from Trump coming to office before he's even taken office. We would not have the peace in Gaza if it wasn't for Trump. It was
100%.
Trump who got that over the line. Absolutely. It's Trump who's now standing in the way of Starmer's stupid plan to hand the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Trump is saying, no, I'm going to have a look at that deal again. Trump is saying, I want member states of NATO to stump up 5% of their GDP on defense. That's great for us. And I hope he goes further with NATO. I think with NATO, he could demand that if you want American protection through NATO, you guys better start enforcing your borders. You guys better start deporting illegal people who've come to your country, because I can't be protecting you with American soldiers and American money if you've got open borders. You know,
Excellent point.
they run opposite to each other. So I hope that the Trump presidency will lead the way and we get on the same bandwagon. But I also hope he will bring real pressure to bear on Europe and the United Kingdom to see sense. And I think, I hope and pray, and, let's just hope I really hope it happens. We need tough love from the US. We need tough love. We don't need to try and find a route through to survive with the Trump presidency, which is what Europe is trying to do. If you listen to all the language in Europe and Starmer's language, Lammy's language, it's all about Ed Davies' language. It's how do we survive a Trump presidency? How does our awful, hollowing out ideology, the deeply damaging ideology we hold, how can that survive a Trump presidency? And I don't want it to survive a Trump presidency. I want that ideology wiped out. And I hope Trump will do it for us.
Definitely. I can attest to that because my ex-girlfriend, believe it or not, she's Native American, but I was talking to her the other night and she was like, I can't believe what's happened to Britain. She said a lot of people around me actually said they were voting Trump, and some of these were Democrats, by the way, but they look at Britain and they look at France and they're kind of like, we don't want that over here. So they've actually turned to someone like Trump because people want men of action, don't they? People who are willing to stand up for their nation and their country and put them first, which is a natural thing. Did you two, Alan and John, did you have any more questions that you want to ask Ben? Because we're running out of time.
I haven't got any questions, but I just wanted to say, everyone watching, please will you like and subscribe, please? Obviously, you can find Ben on Twitter. He's very prominent on Twitter and has done some wicked tweets. So check us all out on Twitter and that, please. And fight the good fight. Keep running in elections. People stand up and be counted. The political landscape's changing. Oldham, a couple of years ago, had 40-odd Labour seats. Now it's just about 30. And Labour has lost thousands of votes in the North Manchester area. So let's change. Let's keep voting. Get involved in local politics.
Yeah. Okay, Alan, did you have any closing?
One closing question for Ben. Obviously, we know your history, where you've been and what you've done. What are you going to do in the future? You know, there's a lot of people rooting for you. We've had a message in the chat, Ben for Prime Minister. And, you know, I've said it before, I think you're one of the best Prime Ministers we haven't had yet. So, you know,
well,
how do we get you there?
So, I mean, I'm obviously I had to find my feet a little bit after I left Reform. It was quite, even though I'd only been in Reform for a year and a half, you know, I had become really very much part of Reform. And I've been finding my feet. I found my feet. I think I found my feet. And now now the question is, you know, how can because ultimately you've got to have an impact at the electoral level. You've got to have an impact at the voting box. And so how do I do that? I don't think the answer is Reform at the moment. I'm very concerned about the fact that Nigel won't embrace the democratization of the party. I don't think you can have a political party effectively controlled by one man. It doesn't, you have a single point of weakness. If Nigel goes under a bus, that's the end of it. But also, you know, how can you bang the drum for British democracy and say we got to trust the British people when you don't trust your own membership? You know, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And then some of the things Nigel is doing, I completely disagree with. You know, he's on the record saying he's not worried about the rate of demographic change. He's not in favor of the mass deportation of illegal migrants. He is recruiting Remainer Tories left, right, and centre. So the answer isn't Reform. Then the question is, can the Conservatives reinvent themselves? And I think Kemi is finding her feet at the moment. She's only taken over. We've got to give some credit to Kemi over the fighting for this national inquiry. I mean, that was her first, I think, significant. She won that debate. She may not have got the national inquiry, but she won that debate. So that was good to see. So I'm watching what the Conservative Party is up to. And then we just got to see how the landscape changes. It's going to be interesting also, Alan, to see what happens with Nigel in the US. during the inauguration, because, you know, he's had his run-in with Elon Musk, and it'll be interesting to see whether Nigel comes back as a new Nigel. Nigel may come back and realize he's got to democratize the party. He's got to get more people in. He's got to take this to a, you know, he may have a chat with Donald and with Elon, and they say, listen, buddy, we care about the UK and we need you to be slightly stronger. You know what Nigel isn't good at doing. I don't want to bash Nigel. I'm not bashing Nigel. Okay. But what he's not brilliant at doing is moving the Overton window, if you know what I mean. In the US, Elon, Donald Trump, all these people, they're moving the Overton window. They're setting new agendas and they're saying, screw the old approach. We're going new. Nigel tends to get on the bandwagon afterwards, but maybe Nigel will come back a new, reinvigorated Nigel, and Reform will then be the party. Who knows? But I'm going to go on fighting. I'm not leaving the battlefield. I'm going to go on speaking. I'm going to go on campaigning. I'm going to find the battles that I think need to be fought, the little battles. The war is the reclamation of our sovereignty, becoming an independent, proud, prosperous nation again. But the battles that get us there are all battles that I can continue to fight. And so I'm going to do that. And let's just see what the future holds.
Fantastic.
Can I make an impassioned plea then? Sorry, can I make an impassioned plea that you root for the independents in elections around the country, because we really need as much help as we can get, and a lot of people are stepping up who haven't done politics before. You know, I think I like you. You know, I've a lot of respect for Nigel. You know, and I've had conversations with him and that, but we're at a point where it's really important that, you know, we need to make some good choices for the future. And I've always felt Nigel wanted to reform the Conservative Party. That was what it was all about. And when it didn't happen, you know, obviously he's had to push with the reform. So, you know, let's work from the bottom up, like John said earlier. You know, if we can resist some of the stuff that's coming top down, you know, then we can start to make a change, I think. And that's what I'm trying to advocate for at the moment.
I've lost Alan there, or perhaps can you hear Alan?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear Alan.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm just saying we need to push from the bottom up now, like John said earlier.
Yeah, certainly.
So, anyway, so I'm not going anywhere. For those,
for
anyone who wants to see me off their screens, they may be disappointed.
Fantastic. I don't think reform has to always be the answer to everything. I think you have great people like Nick Buckley up in Manchester, who is actually making a change and actually changing the way people vote. And he doesn't need a party machine behind him. I mean, I'm a member of Reform. Everyone knows this. I make Reform content, but it doesn't mean I have to disagree with Ben or fall out with any of these gentlemen. You know, we can all have our own opinions. And I do think Ben and I do think Alan and John have some right criticisms about reform. I do think Ben and everyone is right on this panel that the party does need to be democratized. And, you know, I'm glad that they've finally started to set up the branches and everything. You know, that's a positive thing. But at least, and then John, we'll go to John, and then I guess we'll wrap it up because we've gone over time. But it's been a good podcast.
Yeah, I mean, the politics in Oldham, in North Manchester, with the Workers' Party and Reform running, they absolutely decimated the Labour vote and really cut down the Tory vote. And, you know, like, I want people to vote differently, even if it's the Workers' Party. I've met George several times, but, you know, we really do need to think about voting differently, getting involved in politics at a different level, get rid of that two-party system. Would you be, Ben, would you be up for proportional representation?
So I'm not in favour of PR, only because I think that whilst PR may give the illusion of getting more seats, for example, for Reform because it got so many votes, what it inevitably means is that you have to form a coalition to get into government. And that means the people never get what they voted for. So, and also I think that the degree of change required in our country to save our country is massive. We're not talking about a minor adjustment in the direction of travel. We're talking about a 180-degree change. That means we need a very strong government at some point soon, hopefully. And you won't get a very strong government other than through first past the post. And we need a strong government that has joined up thinking, that puts this country first and then drives home its agenda and drives it through the way I hope Trump and Elon and others are going to drive the American agenda.
Yeah, 100%. I'll quickly just add to that. We do need to close up because we have gone really over time. But we see within Europe a lot of different political parties actually being elected who claim they're going to save their country. But the problem is they're now being outnumbered because of the proportional representation system. So if you do want a strong government, although it is very difficult to actually defeat the system we're currently in, we need to do it that way. I mean, I know everyone on this panel have different thoughts about reform, but once upon a time, it's not, people tell me it's impossible, but it isn't impossible, because once upon a time, I think it was the Liberal Party that we had, and then Labour took over that. So
Correct.
It is possible under this system to actually have it replaced, but which political party and who's going to do it, we don't know. I hope that it will be reform, and I hope reform back its ideas up and goes in the right direction. There's a lot to be said about reform. But I wanted to thank my two co-hosts for coming on tonight, and I wanted to thank Habib for appearing on the show. We've gone over time, so thank you for watching, everyone. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stay online.